Well, a couple weeks from the NFL trade deadline, but things are no doubt heating up. However, the Raiders just made a statement about Maxx Crosby that certainly changes some things. Meanwhile, Howie Roseman made some moves, but a bigger one is coming. And he's got an opportunity to do one of the funniest things to Dallas. Also, we got some positive improvements around Kevin Patullo's offense to get into, a few more trade targets linked to the Eagles, and proof that this year is truly anybody's year. So let's talk about that, A.J. Brown's injury that could hold him out this week, and everything else around the NFL. But first, let's run it. What's up, guys? Well, we made it past week 7 in the NFL, but honestly, I'm not sure if we've learned anything up to this point. Like, I'm serious. Take a look at the standings around the league, use the eye test and whatever else you need to, but being as objective as you can, who would you take to win it all?
Oh, go Birds. All right, go Birds, right?
All right, yeah, I had that one coming, but let me rephrase on this. So not necessarily the team that you pick is winning it all, but who would you say is the most complete team in the NFL right now?
Let me think about that, okay?
That's what I'm saying. It's a really difficult question to answer. I mean, maybe the Indianapolis Colts, because if we're going off of record or point differential, Shane Steichen's group has been playing at a completely different level. Which on one hand, I'm happy for Shane. However, then you see how much ahead of the entire league that Indy is on EPA for designed rushes compared to everyone else. And it makes you a little envious that Philly doesn't have Steichen calling plays anymore.
Those were the days.
Nothing we didn't really already know, but coaching matters. Although Philly did find something in the running game that at least is headed in the right direction, which I'll get into a bit later. Anyway, gotta give props to Steichen because this is a dude who's taken Daniel Jones' 24-44-1 record as a starter into a 6-1 Indiana Jones.
Sounds like y'all didn't know much, but we're just going to keep going, keep working, and we have a lot of confidence. I think we got a lot of good players, guys who work hard and do the right things.
Maybe not. Maybe all of us missed it on the Colts. Yet the fact of the matter is, when you have that dominant of a running game, it can mask the weaknesses you may have at quarterback. Of course, sure, perhaps Indy proves me wrong, but I'm still doubting them as a legit Super Bowl contenders at 6-1. Granted, if you look at most sports books, they are now tied with the Eagles for the 5th best odds to win it all. By the way, you want to know who's first? It's the Kansas City Chiefs, despite a 4-3 record at the moment.
That's just gross.
In fairness, KC did just get Rashee Rice back from suspension, and the defense shut out the Las Vegas Raiders, while holding them to just 3 first-down conversions. Yeah, that's an insane stat, but you tell me what's the most impressive. The fact that Vegas only ran 30 plays, which is the fewest amount of plays run by any team in a single game since 2000. And remember, this is with Chip Kelee as their offensive coordinator. You know, the dude whose goal it is to just spam as many possible plays as you can in a game. Anyway, is it that, or is it crazier that Jonathan Taylor has scored more touchdowns than the entire Raiders team combined through 7 games? Personally, I gotta go with anything that makes Chip Kelee look bad, but, I get it if you pick the TD stat because that's also pretty unreal. At the same time, the Raiders are not a good team. Yet if you hear the national pundits talk about Philadelphia, you'd think that it was the Eagles who were 2-5.
I'm shocked that they're 5-2 based on how they've played. They are a middle-of-the-pack offense, and they're a middle-of-the-pack defense right now. And I think shockingly, statistically, they are the 30th ranked rushing offense in the league.
Thank you.
Would you have ever thought that the Philadelphia Eagles, with the best back in football and one of the best dual-threat quarterbacks in football, and one of the best O-lines in football, would be the 30th ranked rush defense? And they've got 2 of the most explosive receivers in the league. Here's what I see when I turn on the Philly tape. I see a team who has gone so far from what was their identity. In the past, it was, we are run first, and we are either handing it off to this guy with a light box because somebody has to account for the quarterback, or Jalen Hurts is going to pull it and he's going to run, or he's going to throw an RPO because we have favorable numbers on the edge and we're going to get in these playmakers' hands. And we're just going to sit there and dent the defense, and we're going to control the clock. And then the point totals will reflect that. And then the defense isn't going to be out there as long. But it's hard not to turn them on and say, they just don't look like what they've done in the past. And maybe they're just shifting their mindset. It looks like they're just trying to put Jalen in the gun, do a lot more drop back passing, and give him the opportunities just to read the defense and throw the football. And if that's what they want to do, that's fine. But I just don't think it's as good as they could be. And I think that's what we need to focus on here is, you're winning games, but are you as good as you could be when you have the top 10 highest paid guys on your team on offense?
Well,
you are the 30th ranked rushing offense in the league, and you're just like squeaking out games.
This is the part that I don't fully understand. They're winning games. Like, sure, it hasn't been pretty, and there's no denying the Eagles, based on national narratives, are 0-7 when it comes to the what-if games. Come on, we've all heard it. If CD doesn't drop that pass, the Eagles lose. If Kelce doesn't drop his pass, Philly loses. If the Rams don't get their field goal block...
Hey, nobody cares. Nobody cares.
Exactly. It's coulda, shoulda, woulda. Now, do the Eagles need to play more consistently and better? Sure. But at the end of the day, Philly has 5 wins on 500-win teams or better, with a banged-up offensive line, a first-time play caller figuring things out, and a very lackluster pass rush. So you tell me, does that say more about the Eagles or more about just the unpredictability of the entire NFL? I mean, either way you look at it, the Birds are one of 6 teams in the NFC with a 5-2 record, and are only a half game behind the Packers thanks to their tie against Dallas. Yet honestly, does anyone believe Green Bay's the odds-on favorite after losing to the Browns, allowing the Bengals to play them close into the fourth quarter, and having to fight back to score with less than 2 minutes remaining to beat the Arizona Cardinals last week?
Not as fierce as we thought.
By the way, I realize they've had to deal with some injuries, but so has every other team. Heck, the Bucs lost another big-time player in wide receiver Mike Evans, who suffered a broken collarbone and will be out for most of the year after literally just coming back from his hamstring injury. Plus, the 49ers lost another defensive end to injury, this time in Bryce Huff, who injured his hamstring near the end of Sunday night's win over Atlanta. Which, okay, is not good news for Eagles fans, since remember, Huff currently has 4 sacks, but ideally we want him to get 8 sacks so that the 5th-round pick that we got back for him, turns into a 4th-round pick. Fortunately, silver lining, head coach Kyle Shanahan told reporters hopefully it won't be more than 2 weeks, so, maybe Huff can get back out there and have Howie cheering him on. In the meantime, within the division, though, Washington has lost another defensive end in Dorrance Armstrong for the season with a knee injury. Plus, Jaden Daniels is once again fighting through a lower body injury after injuring his hamstring against Dallas. Yeah, I don't know what it is with the hamstring injuries, but that's on top of the wide receiver Terry McLaurin dealing with an injury, Deebo Samuel constantly being in and out of the lineup. So obviously that's part of the reason the Commies are 1-4 against the NFC this season, but I also thought we'd see a regression to the mean after so many close calls versus average teams last year. Still though, the question remains, which teams are legit? I mean, take a look at the point differentials this season, and a lot of times that can help decipher the contenders from the pretenders. For the record, that would put the Lions, Seahawks, and Rams as the top teams in the NFC in terms of point differential. Now, I won't lie, that is a metric that usually I judge or kind of help to grade teams in terms of how good they are matching up against competition, but it's more so the holistic approach of the entire season, because if you take it for just, early parts of the season, then you get into schedule factors and everything else there, so you kind of take it with a grain of salt. Like I say, otherwise the nearsightedness of that would have you miss the fact that those 3 teams that I just said, the Lions, Seahawks, and Rams, have the worst strength of victory out of all the teams currently projected to make the playoffs. Translation, I'll sum it up for you, they're beating a bunch of bad teams really badly. Honestly, tell me if I'm wrong, but Detroit's best win this season is what, a banged-up Tampa Bay team this past week? And don't forget, they could barely muster 17 points against the Chiefs on primetime. Or how about the Seahawks? Best win is probably the Steelers back in week 2. I mean, sure, the defense in Seattle can be dominant, but they're coming off a game where they turned the ball over 4 times against the Houston Texans and kept letting them hang around. If anything, at least the Rams beat the Colts, but again, how great is Indy? You see where I'm going with this. The NFC and really the NFL is wide open. Meanwhile, the Eagles have the second best strength of victory in the entire NFC, which makes a ton of sense with them having the toughest schedule in the NFL this year. Not to mention, they've also got head-to-head wins over the Bucs and Rams, which I think will prove very crucial by the end of this season. Anyway, back to the point differential argument real quick. The Eagles are currently at +5. Now, for those counting, that is the worst point differential out of any team projected to currently make the playoffs. That includes NFC and AFC. Or another way to put it, Philly is 16th in point differential so far. However, even last season up to this point, the Birds were only at a +19 point differential. It just wasn't until they hit their stride and started blowing out teams after that point that they finished with one of the best differentials in the league. Just saying, we're seeing some slow positive progressions from this team, and there are some similarities from 2024. Although, truth be told, not in the categories of how they start and finish. Because shout out to Jeff Kerr, but the Eagles are averaging 7.9 points per game in the first quarter this season. Which is really good because, believe it or not, yes, KP's offense does rank first in the NFL in at least one category. It's just that the inconsistency has them ranked dead last in the fourth quarter with a measly 3.7 points per game. Seriously, when it comes to just that takeaway there, you could not be more polar opposite than what happened last season. Don't forget, Kellen Moore's offense couldn't score at all in the first quarter until Week 9 versus the Jaguars. And okay, sure, all's well that ends well, but we had a lot of cries about how an offense with this much talent could start so slowly every single week.
What's the
hell is he doing?
Look, it all worked out, right? And that's the hope with KP. But I also can't help but notice last year the Eagles' running game got better as the game went on. Whereas this season, believe it or not, they actually average 5.1 yards per carry in the first quarter and then get worse to less than 2 yards per carry by the fourth quarter. Yeah, and if you want to know where that ranks, that is dead last by a mile. Although listening to Patullo, there's some situational things that we may not understand for why the running game doesn't work.
I think the game the other day kind of presented itself similar to where we were able to get out in the runs a little bit, then the rest of the stuff opened up. So I think that's kind of a piece of it. And then obviously late in the game, the fourth quarter, we've had a few 4-minute drives where we're running the ball situationally. So situationally, statistically, they're probably going to go down just because of what we're trying to do with the clock in those moments. But I think really when you look at it, it's sometimes the way the game's presented itself as far as get the runs going, then the rest of the offense can feed off of it. And that's kind of how the game went the other day.
What the hell are you talking about? Who are you talking to?
Okay, a couple things there. One, yes, it's infuriating to hear him dodge the question and answer it in that way. It's like, bro, we're watching the game. We can see what's actually happening. But on the flip side, the second point is the offensive line has been terrible. So I can at least appreciate the fact that it feels like he's dodging and avoiding the question or part of it because he doesn't want to throw the offensive line under the bus.
Ultimately, you work through those things. And like I said last week, you accept those challenges when they come in and got a lot of confidence in KP and the direction we're going.
At the same time, play calling needs to continue making improvements and at least is very slightly headed in the right direction. Like, come on, nearly doubling your total under center plays in one game and also calling 10 of Saquon's 18 runs outside was a win in itself. Granted, I pointed this out in the last live stream, but if Cam Jurgens is out of the lineup this week, then we might be back to square one.
Saquon, 18 carries, right? 10 of those were outside zone or outside run concepts, outside zone or toss. So you kind of just compile those together. But 10 of those were outside, which is much better than we've seen previously. We'll take that. 43 yards, 4.3 yards per carry, a 50% success rate on those, right? So out of the 5 successful runs, it's a lot of math here, but people try to stick with it. Hopefully the graphic helps. Out of those 5 successful runs, 3 of those were with Cam Jurgens. Out of the 4 unsuccessful runs, 3 of those were Toth on a bad miss block. So, look, we try to be as fair and balanced as we can. There's probably some preconceived ideas and bias also that goes into it. But 3 of those were because of Toth. And then also, out of the 2 successful runs after Jurgens left, so when Toth was the guy, right, he had 1 good block. So basically it boils down to Toth had 1 good block, 1 good contribution in the run game.
We'll see what the Eagles decide to do at center, but if Jurgens is out of the lineup and they decide to move Landon Dickerson to center, I'm not sure if you're going to be able to pull as much in terms of just the mobility for Landon. We've seen it's not like he can't do it. Yes, he's pulled in the past. He's played at guard position, but I just don't know how that necessarily changes. Do you see less of the outside zone, under center plays, something to monitor? Anyway, when it comes to Wednesday's practice, how great was it to see BG back in the Kelee green? Granted, it's still uncertain if he plays against the Giants, but the fact that he's practicing leaves it open.
Felt good today. I'll just say that. I ain't gonna go too crazy, but I felt good. Felt good.
You want to play? You want to play this week?
We gonna see, man. I'm gonna let coach do that. But honestly, I'm just here to just continue to keep, affirming everybody on what they are, their ability, man. Keep it going, keeping their mind good. While bringing the energy, having fun. When you step out and you come back, you can appreciate the chaos a little more.
If I had to guess, I would say he's playing, especially after that comment. However, the not-so-great news is that A.J. Brown is in serious jeopardy of missing the Giants game. Yeah, because fears started to rise once he was held out of practice Wednesday and then only increased after learning he was a DNP due to a hamstring injury. Which, is bad regardless of how you look at it, but this is something that's really starting to become a constant, lingering issue for A.J. All hope may not be lost, though, because according to Jeff McClain, A.J. Brown, even though he didn't practice, has the hamstring injury. From what he understands, he's tracking to still play on Sunday versus the Giants. Part of me wants to hope that it's an extra precaution, but come on, man. Just when the offense started to show some promise and 1-11 were clicking, this happens?
Just cursed.
Well, I did say earlier that every team's dealing with injuries, but gotta find a way, even if it's without AJ. By the way, for the rest of the team, you had Adoree Jackson, also a DNP with a concussion, so not looking great for him. Cam Jurgens with a knee and a DNP, Azeez Ojulari also a hamstring and DNP, and Jeremiah Trotter Jr. dealing with an ankle who did not practice. Plus, you can see there, Jakorian Bennett is coming back off the practice window from the pec injury, but a limited participant. Grant Calcaterra was back with the oblique injury. Landon Dickerson, who's got an ankle and a back injury, popped up with limited participant status. And then you also had Dallas Goedert with a calf injury and Moro Ojomo with a shoulder injury. So it kind of goes without saying, not looking necessarily great for a number of guys, and I expect that means BG is only that much more likely to go. Plus, going back to it, not necessarily the greatest sign either for Cam Jurgens, as he was a DNP and didn't even show up to practice. Although as bad as that is, the injury report for New York might be worse than Philly's, because you take a look at it, and New York has 3 starters on defense that did not practice. You had cornerback Paulson Adebo, linebacker Brian Burns, and safety Javon Holland. Again, I'll reiterate this, it's just Wednesday, so maybe an overreaction, yet to see 3 starters on defense not practicing and a vital backup also not out there would be a huge blow to the Giants. While you're looking at it here too, there were also several players limited, like starting center John Michael Smits and wide receiver Darius Slayton, but it sounds like they've got a better chance to play. It's funny though, I didn't see Russell Wilson's ego listed on the injury report after tweeting at Sean Payton following the subtle shot he took at his former quarterback, with Russ calling Payton classless but also not surprised.
You know, they found a little spark with that quarterback. I was talking to John Mayer not too long ago, and I said we were hoping that change would have happened long after our game.
I gotta say, sometimes the best moves you make are actually the ones that you don't. After all, we could have had Russell Wilson in Philly if Howie had gotten that move to work out. But thankfully, we've got Mr. Breed of One leading this team, and just like he's the perfect fit for Philly, I want to share about my partnership with Planet Euphoria. Okay, you guys see me repping all kinds of Eagles gear, merch, t-shirts, everything else, and I get asked about that quite a bit. But when Planet Euphoria reached out, I was like, this is absolutely a no-brainer. Because you guys know, I take my t-shirt game very seriously. And right now, when you click the link in the description or scan the QR code and use code PHILLYSPECIAL, you can get 25% off your order with Planet Euphoria. Like I say, it didn't take long for me to realize that this was a 1 + 6 = 7 type of connection. And not only do they have shirts featuring QB1, they've got just about every player you can think of and are officially licensed with the NFLPA. Plus, their graphic tees are made with 100% soft ring-spun U.S. cotton fabric and cotton threads. They're also pre-shrunk and soft-washed, so you know they fit true to size. So again, check them out. Use code PHILLYSPECIAL to stock up on these original fits that celebrate stories, resilience, and individuality while repping your favorite players. All right, big opportunity this week because while Philly may be leading the division right now, it's actually Dallas who has the best division record at 2-1. Yes, I know we technically have the tiebreaker on them, so it's kind of like an extra game over them, but it is starting to become clear that the Cowboys are the biggest competition within the NFC East. Again, that's why in the preseason prediction videos and everything else that we talked about, I picked Dallas to actually finish second and give Philly the toughest challenge in the division. After all, through 7 games, Dallas has the second best offense in the NFL. And get this, kind of a ridiculous stat, but for the first time in their 66 years of existence, the Cowboys have gone 4 straight games without turning the ball over. Of course, yes, as long as Philly plays up to his potential, it shouldn't matter. Because despite that historic stretch for Dallas, you're right, they're only 2-1-1 in those games, courtesy of a defense that's been absolutely abysmal.
They're a bunch of amateurs.
Be that as it may, you can tell the Cowboys are starting to kind of figure out or at least weigh their options in terms of saying like, okay, we got a good offense here. Maybe we make a move, figure out this defense, and see where we're at. Which is why Trey Wingo shared Wednesday that Jerry Jones was reportedly trying to acquire 28-year-old All-Pro Raiders pass rusher Maxx Crosby. Not gonna lie, seeing them trade away the same picks they got for Micah Parsons and then get Maxx Crosby would be pretty hilarious. However, there's no reason to panic, at least yet, because NFL insider Tom Pelissero shared that the Raiders recently met with Crosby to let him know they are not shopping him and will not trade him. Plus, if you believe it, Crosby wants to stay in Las Vegas anyway, or at least according to the Raiders he does.
You're either in or you're out, right now.
Honestly, it's a very, very small percentage that I see Crosby getting traded. At the same time, Brett Coleman made an interesting point following the Chiefs game, saying he wasn't in the trade Maxx Crosby and start over camp at all before, but it's hard not to think that way after watching the embarrassment Sunday. Heck, I'd be a little upset too if my offense could only manage 30 plays while forcing me to go out and defend Kansas City on 77 of them. Which is why I totally get it. For those of you saying, Josh, yeah, but teams say that all the time, and then they end up trading their players, so nothing's ever certain. That is totally a valid point. After all, the Cowboys said that very thing before ultimately trading Parsons to Green Bay. Although, putting it into context, that was also a contract dispute involved, so yeah, not exactly apples to apples there. Still, you got nearly every insider commenting that Howie Roseman is nowhere close to being done making a move, and edge continues to be the top priority according to reports. With beat writer Zach Berman putting it this way, the Eagles are Super Bowl contenders with perhaps the most aggressive GM in the NFL, which means those are perfect ingredients for a deadline buyer.
Hang on to your knickers.
Again, Crosby is probably like a 5% chance, but I also won't deny that you never know with Howie. Like, I'll admit, I never thought he'd make as big of a push for Micah Parsons. And yet, let's remember, he wound up offering 2 first-round picks, a third-round pick, a fifth-round pick, and other unspecified assets for Parsons. Now, obviously, the package wouldn't be as steep for a guy like Crosby, but just saying, you never know if the Raiders might change their mind.
I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse.
By the way, people asking about financial ramifications, salary cap, everything there, the dead cap hit is incredibly minimal for Las Vegas, so just another selling point, a small one. They're probably not going to trade him, but if they wanted to, it's very little dead cap, so that it is advantageous if they wanted to make a move. Again, here's where I'm at. 1, I don't think it's going to happen, but 2, there's no reason to worry about Dallas trading for Crosby. Because again, if the Raiders ever flipped and started considering trades, I'm pretty confident in Howie swooping in with the best deal to steal a premier pass rusher from a division rival, which you can't deny would be pretty hilarious to see Dallas miss out on Crosby in the 11th hour. Of course, I get it. Also, another fair point that Philly would have to do some juggling when it comes to paying Jalen Carter. Yet I think the mindset to have with that is go back to the Micah Parsons argument. Think about it. If Howie was prepared to make that trade and figure out something with his contract then, that just tells me the Eagles clearly have a method figured out for how they could add a big-time player and still pay JC this next offseason. So yeah, the ammunition's there. You have the picks, financial ramifications. Howie's a wizard with the cap anyway. The question is, who do you go after? I mean, who do you want? Realistically, we could say fantasy land here and just name anybody, but realistically, if you think legit the Eagles have a shot, 30% or higher to actually trade and get a guy, who's the guy that you would say? I will say it's interesting because ESPN put together a list on that same notion with the top 25 potential targets while giving them percentages to be traded to the most likely teams. And go figure, but the most likely option there was actually Tariq Woolen in Seattle at 50%, with Jeremy Fowler saying multiple league sources have Woolen earmarked as a strong trade candidate leading into the deadline, due to the fact that the Seahawks have been wanting to trade him for a while and that he doesn't fit what head coach Mike Macdonald wants to do. And maybe so, and I would say this too. He is an upgrade over Kelee, Ringo, and Adoree Jackson. That's 100%. He would be better than those options there. Jakorian Bennett, we'll see, but certainly better than those two. At the same time, if you're kind of weighing the options here, I feel like edge is more of a priority, especially with Azeez Ojulari set to miss some time with a hamstring injury he suffered against the Vikings. Also, it's kind of ironic that despite listing the Dolphins, Jaelan Phillips, and Bradley Chubb as trade targets, ESPN did not link them with Philly, and instead actually linked the Jets' Jermaine Johnson as the edge more likely to be traded to Philly if they made a move. Who knows? It's all speculation and guessing at this point, but the one thing that I think we can be just about as sure of, because we see this from Jeremy Fowler, we've seen it from James Palmer, we've seen it from Zach Berman, other beat writers, is that Howie Roseman is going to make another move. And he did at least make a move on a couple minor ones by opening the practice window for cornerback Jakorian Bennett and signing guard Sua Opeta to the practice squad. Now, Opeta is probably just insurance, but he at least knows the offense from his time here previously. But for Bennett, he showed a couple flashes, and you never know if he could end up being the answer.
Incomplete. I just never felt like I had a good handle on what he is and what he isn't. I just don't think he played enough to answer that with definitive conviction.
It would be amazing. It would do wonders if Bennett could just take the job and run with it. Of course, technically, he's got to get in a couple practices and actually get activated to the roster, but we'll keep monitoring that ahead of the Giants game. For now, do me a favor, drop a like on this video, make sure you're subscribed, turn the notifications on, because if and when we get that Howie move, the big one, anything major, I'll be going live, keep you guys posted. Until next time, this has been the Philly Special.
Like I should feel like